Before the American Revolution even began, the French and Indian War took place between 1754 and 1763. The British fought in this war against the French because there was land in the upper Ohio River Valley that they both claimed to be theirs. Essentially, the British were fighting to protect the colonists because they were the ones who lived in this area. Consequently, British lost a significant amount of money because of this war, and in order to gain the money they'd lost back, they imposed the Sugar Act in 1764. This act forced the colonies to only import sugar and molasses from the British, and they had to pay duties on them. The next act the British forced on the colonists was the Stamp Act in 1765, and this act made it so that the colonists had to pay money for certain legal documents. The colonists had started to get angry because they had no say in Parliament where all of these taxes were being imposed on them. There were protests, angry speeches, boycotts of British goods, and anyone who supported the British would be harassed. Because of this, the British were forced to repeal the Stamp Act just a few years later. But the British kept creating new acts, and in 1766, the Declaratory Act was put into place, which pretty much stated that the British could do whatever they wanted because they were in charge. And following that, there were the Townshend Acts, which were a bunch of new taxes on all sorts of imports. When British troops arrived at the colonies, this was the last straw for the colonists, and on March 5, 1770, local patriots were heckling a group of British soldiers by throwing snowballs, then rocks, then oyster shells at the soldiers who were outnumbered and who eventually fired shots into the crowd of patriots. This was known as the Boston Massacre. On December 16, 1773, a group of patriots known as the Sons of Liberty disguised themselves as Mohawk Indians, went to the Boston harbor, climbed aboard a British ship loaded with tea, and threw 10,000 pounds of tea overboard. This made the British furious, so they sent more troops to Boston. In 1774, 56 delegates from 12 colonies gathered in Philadelphia for the First Continental Congress. They decided to tell local militiamen to be armed and ready in a minute's notice. The British then sent 700 troops to go to Boston and take their weapons. But when the colonists heard about this, people such as Paul Revere rode out to warn the Patriots that the British were coming. On April 19, 1775, the local militiamen and British troops met in Lexington, and this is where the shot heard around the world was fired, marking the beginning of the American Revolution. The British planned to set up at Bunker's Hill, but the rebels found out about this plan, so they put troops on top of Bunker's Hill and on Breed's Hill, which was another nearby hill. This battle lasted 3 hours, but eventually the colonists ran out of ammunition and had to retreat. The French and the Spanish soon began to support the Patriots and sent them supplies to help. Washington became commander of the Continental Army on July 3, 1775. He led the troops to Dorchester Heights, which overlooked Boston, where the British were located. Throughout the night, Washington and his troops set up cannons aimed at the British, and once the British woke up and saw the cannons, they had no choice but to retreat, making this Washington's first victory in the war. In 1776, Thomas Jefferson, with the help of other committee members, wrote the Declaration of Independence, and on July 4th, the colonists officially declared their independence. The Americans began to suffer defeat after defeat, losing battles to the British again and again. Washington's troops eventually unexpectedly attacked the British in the winter and won the battle in Trenton, New Jersey, and again in Princeton, New Jersey. The British then occupied Philadelphia. The Americans gained another victory at Saratoga, and this victory convinced the French to officially join the war. The French helped train the American army and vastly improved their battle skills. The British then evacuated Philadelphia and moved to New York. There was a battle on a hot day in New York that ended in a draw. In June 1779, Spain officially joined the war on the side of the colonists. Nearing 1780, the British moved to the south because the south had more British supporters. The Patriots, under General Nathanael Greene, followed the British to the south, where the British began to gain more and more wins, but in the process they also suffered many casualties. The British, led by Cornwallis, then left the south and moved to Yorktown, Virginia, where Washington's troops, along with French troops, attacked, and after almost a month of battling, Cornwallis surrendered on October 19, 1781. The American Revolution finally came to an end after 8 long years on September 3, 1783, when Great Britain formally recognized the independence of the United States in the Treaty of Paris. The Treaty of Paris allowed Great Britain to move its troops off of American soil and recognize U.S. independence. During the war, about 7,200 Americans died during battle, 10,000 died from disease or exposure, and about 8,500 died in British prisons. The states adopted written constitutions that guaranteed religious freedom, increased the legislature's size and powers, improved taxation, and reformed inheritance laws. Everyone wanted George Washington to become president, and he begrudgingly did on April 30th, 1789. He then retired after 2 years, setting the precedent for today's laws.